Right, in this first video we're going to cover processing public holidays and how we deal with that. So basically what we do is, as the documentation says, the first thing we need to check is our employee status. Now, most of your employees will have been set up correctly and you don't need to do this, but if you want to go and check, this is what happens. So basically there are two ways that TimeHub calculates public holidays, and it does its best to try and automate that particular process. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't go and check, and we'll cover that in a second. So the first thing is it looks at the employee's status. So if the employee is part-time or casual, it looks back at the last 4 weeks of that particular day. So the last 4 Tuesdays or the last 4 Wednesdays. It totals up the hours, including leave, and then it divides it by 4. So it's trying to work out an average number of hours for that corresponding day of the week. Now, if the employee doesn't work, it'll still takes the total hours for the week if they've been paid leave. It still divides it by either or. Now, the thing you've got to watch with that is if your employees are part-time and you transact your leave in days, then obviously that could skew the data that we calculate. The second method is the full-time method, and the full-time method basically looks at the employee if they're full-time. It looks at the daily rule which applies to that particular employee, and the daily rule either comes from their work pattern or from their calendar. So either or, it's the calendar. Basically, if you look at the calendar, you'll see what the rule is that's going to apply, and it will pay the employee the hours that that particular rule represents. Now, as we mentioned in the documentation, you need to just consider the fact that if you have employees who are normally clocking their breaks, then there's something you need to consider with that. And also with the method for your daily rule is a casual method, then there's an effect. So if we go and look at the daily rules, which is where we're getting this data from for our full-timers. So if I come into my daily rules, and I'll find a daily rule here. So in this particular case, we have a daily rule which is from 9 till 2 o'clock. So that's a 5-hour shift. This pattern happens to have a break. So this is what will drive it. So if the employee was on that particular rule, even if we look at another one here, hopefully it will catch up with me in a second. Or if I look at the cleaner, maybe the cleaner might be better. So here's my 8:30 to 5:30. Sorry, 8:30 to 4:30 here. So this is what the employee would get paid, those 8 hours. Now, if there's no break set up in here because they normally clock their breaks and we have no automatic breaks, then TimeHub doesn't know what to do about the breaks. So it will pay the employee from 8:30 till 4:30 in this particular case. If there is a break in the rule, then it will apply the break as part of calculating the public holiday. So you need to consider that. The other thing to consider is if you have an employee who is full-time and their daily rule is on the casual method, then because it's casual and we don't have any expectation of what the hours would be, then the system will not calculate any hours and you need to go manually override that. Or you need to roster the employee onto a rule which has a start and finish time built into it. So those are a couple of things to check. Now, if you wanted to go and set up a public holiday rule to deal with the breaks, and you don't normally have breaks, then what you could do is you could set, as we described in the documentation, you could set up a public holiday with break. I might give that a bit darker color. And so in here I'm saying from 9 till 5 with a break after 4 hours, which means this, in this particular case, if I roster someone to this particular rule, then they will get paid 7.5 hours. Now you don't need to roster this unless you're wanting to override what TimeHub is going to do automatically. But let's assume that I've got this set up. Then I can come into my calendar, go to the Christmas period or the New Year's period. So we go to New Year's in this particular case, and I can say, right, I'm going to roster all of my staff on the public holiday with break rule, and I simply choose that rule, and then I go and put the employee onto that, which means that will override anything that TimeHub would have done otherwise, and the employee will get paid in this particular case 7.5 hours because that's what I'm choosing to pay them. So this you can choose to pay more or less depending on what you want to do, or you can let TimeHub work it out automatically. The important thing, as we said, bear in mind is that if the employee is on a daily rule which is casual, then the result will be zero. So having done this, having preempted this, as we've also said, remember to make sure that your data is clean prior to the public holiday. So the public holidays will calculate at the beginning of the public holiday day. So what it does, in particular with casual employees, if the employee has an invalid, let's say it's Tuesday and the Tuesday before the public holiday is still invalid, i.e. you haven't done your maintenance yet, or the employee's not clocked and you haven't maintained that to put them onto leave, etc., then TimeHub has no data to work out its average with, so it will treat that day as zero. So basically you would end up dividing that particular thing by 4, if it was over a 4 week period, and that's what it'll try and work out. So you need to make sure that you're doing your maintenance before the public holiday falls, in particular for the Tuesdays and Wednesdays this year for Christmas and New Year. But once I've got my data in here, if I come in here and find a particular employee that I've got in here, if I go and find Carol, I know that Carol's set up the way I want her to be set up, and I look at all my data, get rid of that. So if I go and find Carol, and the system in this particular case has generated Carol's hours at 6.5. Now, if I don't like that, then I can simply come in here, click on the blue line, change the units to something else. If I wanted to pay her 8, or I wanted to pay her 4, or I wanted to pay her nothing, all of those options are there to you if you want to do that, and you simply save that. Now, if you only want to look at the public holidays, because obviously you may have multiple days sitting in your TimeHub system, in your filter option here, you can filter on the flag, which is public holiday. And if you apply that, then you will only find the public holiday records within the current pay cycle that you're dealing with. So that's one way of addressing that if you need to edit that particular data. But in general, TimeHub will work it out. It's just a case of you trying to check. Now, as we said at the bottom of the page with this help file, is we have created an XLS file. If you're wanting to double check what TimeHub is calculating as far as the averages are concerned, in particular it's to do with the averages, we've got a tool which you can request from us where you can come in here and you can drop some data out of TimeHub into this Excel spreadsheet, and it will show you what the employee's average hours are for a Tuesday or a Wednesday or whatever day of the week is that you're wanting to include. So I want to also look at Monday, so I can see what the employee's average hours are over, in this case, a 4 week period. If it was whatever the data is that you're wanting to look at, and it can show you overall what their average hours is, what their average hours is for a Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, etc. So if you'd like to look at that with your particular employees, just to verify that TimeHub is doing what it should do, we know that it is, but if you wanted to verify that, please just email successteam@timehub.co.nz, and we will send that XLS spreadsheet to you with some instructions. So that's how we deal with processing the actual public holidays and making sure that they are checked and correct. So it's important that you don't just take what the system is generating at face value. It'll be correct for 99.9% of the cases, but it's always good to check that data. So if you've got any questions about this, please feel free to reach out to our help desk and talk to the success team, and we'll be happy to talk you through the process. In the next video, we'll talk about actually doing the processing of your data through to payroll, etc., around this particular busy time.